Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are taking the time to join us today in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in this mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, CastBox, Audible, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests for you today. Terry Drobnik is here to celebrate Moving Day. This is a really fun and fascinating conversation. And later in the show, Sandra Salisbury is here to celebrate something all parents can relate to: the baby who stayed awake forever. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Marie Nichols was recently on my Connecticut Book Festival's podcast, and what a delightful woman. One of the things she said really struck home with me. She said, parents nurture with care, siblings are taught to share, but grandparents embrace the dares. We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest is a colorful, fun-filled book where this grandmother dares to embark on a wild journey with her grandson into the dinosaur forest. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on bookshop.org. You and your kids and you and your grandkids are going to love this book. It's We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. We are going to have a great time. Joining us from Northern California, our guest is here today to celebrate her debut picture book. Think how exciting our guest must be. The name of the book is Moving Day. Please welcome to the show, Terry Roach Drobnik. Hey, Terry, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been so excited. This is my very first podcast interview.
Wow. Well, we are honored to be your debut podcast for your debut picture book. This is very cool. Tell us about Moving Day.
Well, Moving Day was based on the Victorian house in San Francisco, a 139-year-old Victorian house that was moved 6 blocks. And so it's based on a true story. And a friend of mine sent me the news clip of the real house, a video, and she said, this would make a great picture book. And, you know, many people have given me ideas for picture books, but nothing resonated like this. And I got so excited. I started researching everything I could find about this house online. And I sat down and I cranked out a first draft that day. I have had so much fun with this book.
That is, I'm amazed that you can actually move a house, and that didn't originally come with wheels.
It's an engineering feat. It is amazing. And it dates back to, in San Francisco, there's a real history of moving houses, and they would move them because of transportation or development. And in fact, the developer who moved this house was going to build condominiums on the site where this house was, and he didn't want to tear it down. Thank goodness. So he searched and searched for a place, but it was a real ordeal. It was like 15 different agencies, like 8 years to coordinate everything to move this house.
Yeah.
So it was a real ordeal.
I'm sure. Was this done recently?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard some of the regulations that California is famous or infamous for. Yes, I don't envy people who have to build anything in California.
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, and then when he found the property where he wanted to move this house, it wasn't wide enough. So he had to move. He purchased the mortuary next door, and he had to move the mortuary to the left to make room for the house. So he didn't have to pull the mortuary anywhere, but he had to move it. And then he made both into condominiums, and it's beautiful now. The house is all restored, and it's gorgeous. So I give him such credit for moving the house instead of tearing it down.
I'm just in my own head. I'm thinking it's probably as expensive or maybe even more expensive to move a house that old.
Yeah, it was a pricey idea to do, but he did it, and I give him credit for it. He is my hero because I live in Petaluma, which is north of San Francisco, and we have a lot of old Victorian houses. And when I see old pictures of downtown, there are some beautiful old buildings that have been destroyed to build new ones. Yeah. So I give anybody credit for not tearing down a place. And, in San Francisco, they actually did this before automobiles were invented, and they would pull these houses by horses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, they have to hydraulically lift these houses and then, put them on a flatbed. And then this house had to go down a hill, around a corner. They had to trim trees that were in the way because this was a huge building. They had to take street signs down. They had to move electrical wires. They had to mark off all the parking on these roads because there wasn't room for parked cars. It was like having a parade, the coordination that went into it.
I'm sure. Well, there must be something pretty special about this house. What makes this house so valuable, so important that somebody would go through the expense and to make this happen?
I don't know if there was anything particular about this house, but it did. I mean, it was an old house, 139 years old, and it was a beautiful Victorian, and it survived the famous '06 quake in San Francisco. So, yeah, I think people just want to preserve heritage, and this is a way of maintaining some of our history by keeping these old buildings. Yeah. I live in an older house, so I have a huge appreciation for older homes and older buildings.
Yeah. Well, if San Francisco is anything like Boston, the new buildings that are going up are pretty ugly.
Yes.
This looks like cardboard boxes piled on top of each other.
Yeah. It's wonderful when these houses can be preserved. Definitely. Yeah. And so this house that I based the story on, when my friend sent me the video of the house being moved, I thought, yeah, this is a great story, but how can I make it kid friendly? If I'm going to write a picture book. And so I decided to tell it from the house's perspective. And the house was resistant to moving.
Yeah.
So it takes you through the whole process of moving, being embarrassed that they're having to, trim the trees, the birds, are not pleased, and, wanting to make itself smaller. And part of the whole influence of this book was that my daughter at the age of 5 was very resistant to moving. And we only moved like a half a mile. But she didn't want to leave the house. She didn't want to leave the neighborhood. And so it just made me realize what a common dilemma this is. And it can be really difficult for kids.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we've talked about here on Reading with Your Kids is the fact that we're a much more mobile society than we ever have been. I've joked a lot here on the podcast that, I grew up, everybody in my family lived within a square mile of my childhood home. And that's on both sides of the family, which was really annoying sometimes because you couldn't do anything without somebody coming up and smacking you in the back of the head, telling me they're a relative of mine.
I love it.
That doesn't really exist for a lot of people anymore.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, I'm fortunate that I am like 5th generation San Francisco Bay Area. That's unusual. So I have a lot of relatives that live in the area. But my closest relative is my brother, and he's 20 minutes away. So yeah, nobody's in Petaluma. But we're fortunate that Petaluma is a small community, and it's like everybody knows each other, and, it's very supportive.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said, this was inspired by a video that your friend sent you.
Yes.
And she sent it to you knowing that you were looking for an idea for a picture book. I don't know if we've had anybody else on the show who has made the intention of writing a picture book known to the world before they had an idea. Most people is like, I was telling my kids this story at night, and I had it, and I thought, well, this is really good. I should turn it into a picture book. This is a first. It's like, I want to do a picture book, and then people are sending you ideas. Where did the spark to become a picture book author come from?
Well, it's interesting. I never would have predicted that I would be a writer. I was always a reader. As a kid, I would be that kid after, lights out. I would be under the covers with the flashlight. I've always loved reading, but writing never really came naturally to me. So when I was a medical social worker for many years, and then I was home with my girls. I was the ultimate soccer mom. But then I started a boutique business. I was hand stitching rag dolls out of reclaimed clothing. And I had this little boutique business, and I sold them online or in boutiques. And all my friends said, you should write picture books about your little T-Socks characters. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about it. I thought, well, that could be really fun. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what I was getting myself in for. No idea how difficult the picture book market was, how difficult it was to write an entire story in 500 words or less. I didn't know what show don't tell means. I didn't know that I had to leave room for the illustrator. So I joined a critique group. I joined SCBWI. I went to conferences. I took classes. And slowly, after a couple of years, was ready to submit and started querying agents and sending my manuscripts to publishing houses that accepted unsolicited manuscripts. But I got a ton of rejections. I mean, I've never counted them up, but it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. People do not realize how difficult it is. And then once I got my agent, I thought, oh, I'm on Easy Street. I've got an agent. He'll sell all my books for me. Well, we got a ton of rejections after I got my agent. Mm-hmm. But he finally sold Moving Day to Margaret Ferguson at Margaret Ferguson Books at Holiday House. And it's been a dream working with her. She's been great. And she even asked, many times the author doesn't have any say in who the illustrator is, but she actually asked if I had any ideas. And I was like, do I ever? I had a whole spreadsheet of illustrators, waiting for someone to ask me this question. And so I narrowed it down to like 3 that I thought would really fit this book and sent those to her. And she said, okay, these look good, but here's who I'm thinking of. And she sent me Jennifer Black Reinhardt's illustrations. And she said, this is someone I've worked with. She's super easy to work with. Her illustrations are amazing. She does everything by hand. It's pen and watercolor, which is my favorite medium. And I fell in love with Jennifer's artwork. It was the perfect match. Yeah.
I don't think people know that the illustrator, oftentimes there's no communication at all between the illustrator and the author. In fact, we've had 2 or 3 occasions where the illustrator and author, the first time they communicated was as guests on the show. And one woman broke down in tears. I'll never forget it. She's so happy, and I was so happy. I almost.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's in the traditional publishing world, the editor chooses the illustrator. And a lot of people don't realize that. So many people say, oh, did you do the illustrations or did you pick the illustrator? And I said, no, my editor did, but I couldn't be more thrilled. But yeah, we had no official contact during the period of time because the editor doesn't want the author to influence the illustrator. They want the illustrator to come at this story with their own perspective and add to that story. And so I knew I wasn't supposed to contact Jennifer, but secretly I just messaged her through Instagram because I wanted her to know how excited I was that she was on board. And so I said, Jennifer, I just want you to know how excited I am. So we communicated through Instagram, but nothing about the book. Right. I never said anything about the book or what she should do. She never asked any questions. We knew there was a line there. And so it wasn't until after the book was totally complete that Margaret shared our emails, and now we email back and forth almost daily because we're working on our launches together and working on the trailer and, stickers and all kinds of things that we're combining our efforts on.
That's really wonderful. I love it. I love it. It took me a long time. I've been doing this for about 8 years, and it took me a long time to kind of say, okay, yeah, that's it. I kind of understand that. But, publishers have been doing a great job putting out great kids' books, so they know best.
They do, and they know how to match. Somehow, Margaret has been in this industry a long time. She just has the intuition and the background knowledge to know what kind of illustrator is going to match a story. And I'll tell you, when I saw the illustrations for the first time, I was blown away. She added so much to the story. She just made it come alive. And the details that she could accomplish with the pen and ink drawings and the whimsicality of her style just really matched the words in the story. And actually during the time when she was illustrating, my dad died of Alzheimer's, and I posted something on Facebook and Instagram that how much I was going to miss him, and she sent me a message on Instagram, and she said, would you like me to illustrate your dad in the book?
Oh.
Wow. I mean, tears were flowing, needless to say. And I said, yes. And so she asked for some pictures of my dad and kind of what his interests are. And so I said, well, he was a runner. He went to Cal, so he would, blue and gold running outfit would be perfect. So she drew him in as one of the people observing the moving of the house, because it was like a parade. People were lining the streets watching this house being moved. So he's one of the people, it's just a small little illustration, but he's on the side, applauding the house. And next to him is me and my dog, Hobie.
Oh.
So, I mean, she's just that kind of person and that kind of illustrator. We just feel this kindred spirit, and we've never met in person, but we're dying to do another book together. So fingers crossed that we can do that someday.
I'm very sorry for your loss. I know,
Thank you.
Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, it's very difficult to watch our loved ones leave us before they actually leave us. But what a beautiful tribute to have your dad in the book, to think that thousands and thousands of families will be seeing your dad, cheering on that house as they read your story. What kind of conversations can you imagine families having as they're reading Moving Day?
Hopefully that, moving can be difficult, yes, but that change can be a positive thing. It can teach kids how to adjust to new situations. It can be a good family bonding time. It can lead to self-confidence for kids. But I think that the very simple message that's in the book is it's not necessarily where you are, but who you're with. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of in the middle of the story, the house, because it's from the house's perspective, the family says goodbye to the house. And midway through the story, the house is saying, where's my family? And it's anxious, not knowing where its family is. Is its family going to be there? And in the end, I don't know if I should give away the ending, but the family is there. And it's all about being with that family.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Simply beautiful. Now, you were telling me that your publishing date is about 2 weeks from the day that we're recording this. How exciting is it for you? What was it like when you first got that first author's copy and you held it in your hand?
People call them their book babies, and now I get it. I totally get it. I got this manila envelope from Holiday House, and I wasn't expecting it. And I said to my husband, this looks important. And I opened it up, and there was my book. I had no forewarning. I was thinking that I wouldn't get my book until I got the box full of books. But I got that book, and it was just like, oh my God, holding it, looking at each page, seeing every illustration, seeing how Jennifer, the illustrator, had turned the bushes next to the house into the carpet bags that the house carries on her trip. I mean, it was beyond exciting. Yeah. And building up to the launch has been super exciting. I mean, doing podcast interviews, getting interviewed by the paper. And I'm actually, to celebrate my publication day, I'm going to have a little story time with Terry out in front of my house, because I'm putting up a, little free library for kids. And so that the opening day will be on my pub day. So it's all very exciting leading up to it, and I'm super excited about doing, school visits and just seeing the kids' little faces light up as I read and talk to them. I'm really excited about that.
That's wonderful. I have to ask, because the suggestions that people made that you take the dolls that you are creating in your boutique business and write stories about them, that's like, duh, yeah, absolutely. What happened to that idea?
Well, I ended up closing my shop, my little T-Socks ragdoll shop, because it was taking too much time away from my writing. And I really wanted to write full time. And I ended up, talking about my dad. I wrote a memoir about my dad and his Alzheimer's and my journey with him and his best friend. And I worked on that full time for 3 years. So I kind of put my picture books aside, my picture book writing aside for that. But I really wanted to devote full time to my writing. And, because the ragdolls were all one of a kind, it took a lot of time to, post each doll and list them on Etsy. And the sewing was all done by hand, so that took a lot of time. It was just time for me to move on, and I have no regrets. I loved it. I did that for 10 years, and it was just such a wonderful creative outlet. But so is writing picture books.
Yep.
So
you mentioned that you hope, you and Jennifer both hope that you can work on a book together again. Anything in the works right now that you can give us a sneak peek about?
Well, I would love to do a continuation of this book. But when we pitched it to Margaret, she said, we're going to have to see how this book does first. So I get that. But so that's an idea. My agent has had a couple of picture books out. One kind of based on a real story, kind of like The House. I'm not going to give that away though, because that's out on submission. And then another one that's a fractured fairy tale with the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf. And I've never done a fractured fairy tale, and that was kind of fun to do. And then my memoir is out on submission as well.
Awesome. Well, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Moving Day, maybe join a newsletter so they can be the first to know about the memoir coming out and the other books coming out.
Yes, definitely. My website is Terry Drobnick, TERIDROBNICK.com. And you can connect with me on Twitter, X, excuse me, on Instagram and Facebook. If they just search under my name, it'll pop up. And then I also have a Substack newsletter, so they can connect to me either through the website or directly on Substack through my name.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, one more thing. I think you said that this was in part based on your daughter's not wanting to move when she was young. What does she think about the book?
She loves it. And, my girls, both daughters, have been so supportive of this writing career of mine. And when I told her, this is kind of based on your situation, she was like, well, yeah. Anyway, she loves it. Yeah.
Wonderful. We've had a really great time speaking to the author of Moving Day. It's a debut picture book from our guest, Terry Roach Drobnick. Terry, thanks so very much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Jed, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures, delightful children's book written by Helen Rogerson. Woofy awakens suddenly to a feeling that his friend Bun needs him. When he arrives at the place his nose leads him, Woofy is confused and doesn't find Bun right away. Then a shout from above leads to an amazing experience as he puts his paleontology skills to work. Together, he, Bun, and a cat that hangs around the site wrap up a wonderful adventure involving a T-Rex skull and a very cool twist of an ending. The story is told in a lyrical style that incorporates actual fossil hunting concepts and vocabulary. If you like dinosaurs, friends who help, and adventures, you will love this book. You can check out Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures and all the Woofy books at unpackyourownhappy.com. Hey, my friends, would you like to bring a little warmth and magic into your home? Let me introduce you to Welsh Mountain Candles, hand-poured on a working Amish farm in Lancaster County. These all-natural, toxin-free candles are made from palm wax with a stunning crystallized glow, rich coconut apricot wax for a creamy finish, and essential oils for a pure, refreshing scent. Whether you're winding down, setting the mood, or just love a great candle, Welsh Mountain Candles are crafted with care and made to be shared. Visit welshmountaincandles.com. Use the promo code JED10 for 10% off your order today. Light up your home with Welsh Mountain Candles, where every candle tells a story. Join us from the beautiful state of California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new picture book, Every Parent's Nightmare, and as she said, every parent's reality. The name of the book is The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever. Please welcome to the show, Sandra Salisbury. Hey, Sandra, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm excited to talk about the book.
I'm guessing that you don't have any babies right now.
I don't have any babies in the room with me right now, but I have a 3.5-year-old and I have a 4-month-old.
How'd you have time to write a book?
Between when the 3.5-year-old was born and the 4-month-old was born.
So you are experiencing the baby who stayed awake forever right now.
Yes, it's, I think the kind of book that really comes from experience, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the story that we're going to experience when we read this book with our kids.
So, the story follows a typical night of any parent, where they're putting their baby to bed and the baby is not ready for bed. And so it follows the hours of the day, and the various antics that the baby goes through to try to stay up a little bit later, to stay with their family, and unfortunately up until morning.
Boy, I remember Mike, my son, had trouble going to sleep at night, and he was okay if he slept with us or in the room with us, but by himself, no. And we talked to our pediatrician about it, and he said, "Oh, just put the kid in the bed, shut the door, and let him cry himself to sleep." And that didn't work. That did not work.
Actually, my confession is that both of my kids are pretty reasonably good sleepers. I have not had an all-night situation, but I think, every kid has like that night where they'll just randomly be awake for like an hour or two in the middle of the night. And that was really what sort of brought the story about. Even though she wasn't up all night, it certainly felt like she was awake forever. But, of course, that was up until we took the pacifier away. And then, now she is the toddler who stayed awake forever, and she's a much worse sleeper.
I wonder what she will think in years to come when she finds out that she was the inspiration for this book.
I think the baby comes off very good in the book, so I'm hoping she'll be proud.
All right, that's great. She won't listen to the podcast most of the time.
We'll hide certain truths from her.
Well, I was speaking to an author the other day, and she has a 16-month-old, and it was her first child. And I just remember, even though, I said that my son had trouble going to sleep, except when he slept with us, that was such a wonderful, joyous time to welcome him into our family and into our lives.
It is, I feel like being a parent is, I think everyone probably feels this way. It's the most wonderful and joyous and hardest thing you do.
Absolutely. And, it probably should be, because you're helping, we always talk about how hard it is for teachers and what an important job they have and what a hard job they have. And that's true. You're getting a kid at 4 or 5 years old and you're teaching him colors and how to read and everything. But a parent with an infant, you're teaching that child everything. Everything is new to that child.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's, I feel like with my kids, there are, we talk about the hard moments so much with kids and it's something that like all parents relate to. And in the book, there's a lot of these hard moments, but, I feel like the great moments really outweigh them and there's so many more of them. But they're just all throughout the day and the night that it can be almost easy to like not notice them. And then to just think like, oh, I have this baby who stayed awake all night. But then, you also have these sweet moments, even if it's the middle of the night and you're with your baby and you're like, why won't you sleep? It still can feel really sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the greatest joys, and I think there's some magical power, is when a baby sleeps on your chest. And I'm telling you, I don't know what it was. I discovered it with my son. If he's upset or crying, I could put him underneath my chin. And just being in that spot, it worked for my son. It worked for my daughter. I've been at church a couple of times and parents have come up and stuck their babies in my arms and right up there, go to sleep right away.
Maybe you're the answer. Maybe you're just the baby whisperer and everyone who has a baby who won't sleep just needs to stick it under your chin and that'll solve that problem.
Yes. My wife will be delighted with that. Thank you for that. I have a feeling that the baby who stayed awake forever is going to be kind of like a secret pleasure for parents to read.
I hope so. I hope it's one of those books that's not too difficult to read over and over again. I feel like with every picture book, when you buy it, you're making a commitment to read this book 100 times and you hope you don't regret it. But the book is written, there's a lot of humor in it for both children and for adults and for parents who will like see these moments. I want them to see themselves in the book and be able to laugh about it.
Yeah. And I would guess that another big fan group for this book could be the slightly older siblings of the baby who are also being kept awake at night as the baby cries all night long.
It's funny because the book is based on my older child staying awake, but it feels, and now it's coming out now, but it feels really applicable to my family right now because we have a young baby and, an older sibling, and she, can relate a lot to the interactions that happen of trying to soothe the baby, of like the antics that the baby gets up to. And, the 4-month-old is still pretty young, but she's starting to get a lot more active and interactive. And so we're seeing the two siblings together a lot more. And I think that my older daughter, when she looks at the book now, she doesn't see the baby as being her. She sees the baby as being her sister.
Yeah. It'll be interesting if that changes as they get older and into their teen years.
I'm going to worry about one step at a time.
I love it. Hey, did you always aspire to be a children's book author?
Well, I went to art school actually to study comics and to do graphic novels. And when I really started doing it, I thought, wow, this is a lot of drawing. And it was a lot challenging. And a picture book is about 32 pages of drawings. And so I started to explore that. And I took a really great children's book illustration class with Win Pham, who, got a Caldecott honor a couple years ago. And this was, long ago that I took these classes, but she was very influential. and really inspirational. And I thought when I took her class, it really felt like I found what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. I had an interesting conversation. There was a week where I had two different graphic novel artists and authors and illustrators on the show. And the books are very different style. And I was talking to the first, and she said, I knew that I was going to have to draw this character about 700 times. So I made it as simple as possible and made my life much easier. And I really commended her for her honesty in sharing that. And then it was either the same day or the next day, the next artist came on, and she was saying how difficult it was because her graphic novel was a historical fiction, and she's writing about ancient Greece, and there's so many details that she has to do. I never would have chosen to do this if I realized how hard it would be.
Yeah, it's a real commitment, and I find that like a picture book project is sort of the perfect size for me, that by the time I reach the end of it, I'm sick of it and I never want to look at it again. And so a graphic novel is much too much for me. I'd get sick of it after, a third of the way through and never be able to finish.
Yeah. What comes first for you, the story or the images in a typical project?
Well, in a typical project, I work on the story a lot first because, if I have to make sure it's going somewhere, that I know the beginning, the middle, and the end before I start drawing, because the drawing for me is really still the bulk of the work. So I want to make sure I have an idea that has legs to it. And so once I have a functional manuscript, then I'll start working on the sketches and I'll go back and forth. With The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever, the first thing that came was actually the cover. Because it was basically, I came up with the idea as a joke on social media of a fake picture book called The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever. And I did that cover, and it just, resonated with enough people that it became a real book.
All right. Well, that's a good way for a book to be born into the world.
Yeah, it was funny because my editor said, if you decide to develop this book, then I will take a look at the manuscript. And so then I really thought like, oh no, I actually have to write this book. And so that really got me motivated to sit down and come up with something.
That must have been an interesting conversation. If you write it, I'll take a look at it.
It actually happened on Twitter, or I think at the time it was still Twitter. So that she said in a tweet, if you want to write it, you can send it to me. And so I thought, oh gosh, better write it.
Better write it. How, with your daughter, your 3.5-year-old, what does she think of her mom writing these great books that she gets to sit in your lap and read together?
I don't know that she really thinks about it any more than any other kid thinks about their parents' job.
Uh-huh.
It's not the kind of work that I can really do in front of her. And even if I do it around her, the drawings, the sort of the time it takes to get from me working on the book to the book being physically in our hands is so long that she doesn't remember it at all. So she knows that I write these books, and she'll turn to the back jacket and she'll find my picture and she'll say, Mama. But, sometimes she'll flip to the back of a random book and she'll point and she'll be like, Mama. And I'm like, no, that's Dan Santat. That's not Mama. So she knows that the books are mine, but I don't know how much she really understands that I'm working on them and creating them. And
yeah, I know when, authors write and they're getting into the zone, it can be very, very difficult for them if they're interrupted by a baby or a big sister, and they have to stop what they're doing and attend to that, and it can be hard for them to get back into that writing zone. Is that the same for a visual artist?
Yes, it is really difficult for me. I work best with large blocks of time, and I'm not great with transitioning or focusing on something else and then trying to come back. If I know exactly what I'm going to do next, then it can be easier to come back to something. But it's really hard for me. I can't sit down and like work for 15 minutes and then get up and tend to my children and then work for another 15 minutes. So I really, childcare is essential to complete a book.
Yeah. I'm familiar with writing and have written my the educational magic shows I present at schools and show notes, and I've written a couple of kids' books myself. So I kind of understand that process, but I don't necessarily understand the process of creating visual art. Do you have the whole thing kind of in your brain when you start to put pen to paper, or do you experience what a lot of authors have come on and said, that suddenly the character said something I didn't expect and it took the story in a different way? Do you ever have that as you're drawing an arm and you wanted to go right, but the character said, no, we're going to go left, and you just take off in that other direction?
I don't know that really happens. I wouldn't say it's either way, that I have this great idea in my head and I know, and I just pour it onto the paper with my pencil. There's a lot of exploration with drawing, but I think that sort of the story itself has already taken shape in my head. I spend a lot of time just thinking about it. Part of my writing process, a large part of my writing process, is really just thinking about the project. And so I might work on it a bit and then just think about it on and off for a week and then go back. And so I feel like I have a strong sense of the story before I begin the sketches. So it's unlikely that there'll be a significant change in the story at that point, unless I'm drawing and then I realize like, oh no, this isn't working with the story. And then there might be a revision, but that's not necessarily because I've drawn something wild and thought, wow, I really should go in this direction instead. Though that would be pretty interesting. I'm sure there are illustrators who do work that way, because I feel like everyone has a different process. Absolutely.
I'm on your website and I'm looking here. The art that you create is really sweet, and I could see how it would appeal to young kids.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is this a style that you created intentionally, or was it just something that was, this is just how I like to create?
So my first two books were done in watercolor, and that I think is just the product of me exploring media and my drawing and it coming together to be the kind of art that I love to paint. But for The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever, I didn't feel that my watercolor style was appropriate for the kind of book it was. It's, very like, there's humor. It's sort of meant to be like a loud, funny book, and sweet watercolor paintings didn't feel like the right match for it. So my illustrations for The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever were much more intentional, where I sat down and thought, I have to come up with a commercial style that matches the tone of the book. And I also decided to work digitally, in part because I felt like that was the right fit for the book, but also because now, I had a young child at home and I needed something that I could pick up and put down. And, if my child did need something, I couldn't be like, no, I have to finish this watercolor wash that I'm doing, so I don't destroy the whole painting. And so switching to digital media really was because I had kids at that point. Whereas my first two books were done before my daughter was born.
Tell me, do you have a work in progress you can give us a sneak peek of?
So the next book that I'm currently working on, I just finished the manuscript and I'm working on sketches now, and I'll start final art soon, is The Baby Who Only Said No. I hope that I'm allowed to reveal that.
We won't tell anybody.
Well, it'll just be between us and the listeners.
That's
we won't
right.
tell my editor.
That's right. I'm curious. Have you illustrated a book for another author right now, and if not, is that something that you're looking forward to do?
I have done illustrated books for other authors in the past. I did a book for a small local publisher back, I want to say like almost 15 years ago at this point. That was my very first project. And then I have also done some educational books, and I have also done some self-published books. But recently, it's mostly been writing my own books and then illustrating them. And I think I'm always open to the idea of illustrating other people's stories, but it's something about having full creative control also often makes it easier for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, I'm open to it, but I'm also, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
And then this question just popped into my head. Would your head explode if an editor came to you and said, "Hey, listen, I love this manuscript. It really is fantastic. I want to buy it, but I think I have this other illustrator that I'd like to illustrate the book"?
I would be open to that. I actually, there's a lot of great illustrators who, like Adam Rex, I think he's had other illustrators illustrate his work, and he's also illustrated works of other authors. Part of me is like, great, because I feel like the illustration is the part that takes the most time. So I'm like, let someone else do it. But I definitely think, I've thought of stories where I thought my art isn't the right fit. And even with The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever, I had that thought where my watercolor art was not the right art for that book. And if I were an art director, I wouldn't have chosen me to do it. And so I had to come up with a different style that fit the book. And so if an editor and art director said, "We love this manuscript, but we have this other vision for it," I think that would be great.
Awesome. I love that. I love being the host of Reading with Your Kids because I just find the creative process so fascinating, and I love being able to just hear how other people are doing it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I feel like picture books are a really collaborative process, even for someone like me who does both the writing and the illustration. It's still very collaborative with my editor and with the art director and the designer and everyone who's involved. And so extending that collaboration a bit more to working with another author or working with another illustrator, is just part of the process and just part of creating a unique book.
Yeah. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever and find out more about you.
So my website, sandrasalisbury.com, has information about me and my book. And I also have an Instagram account, Sandra Salisbury, where they can see more updates.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever. Our guest has been Sandra Salisbury. Sandra, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us to the next exciting episode of the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite podcast. And also, if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review. We love the iHeartRadio app. We love Good Pods, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We love all the many, many platforms that carry Reading with Your Kids. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. Our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, and our website, readingwithyourkids.com. If you are an author, please be sure to go to readingwithyourkids.com to find out how you can be a guest here on the show. It's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people all around the world about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Terry Rodney. Please be sure to check out Moving Day. And we also want to thank Sandra Salisbury. Please be sure to check out The Baby Who Stayed Awake Forever. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids. Bye.